Here we are solving trig equations in between 0 and 2 pi. So we're not only going to need to know our trig chart and our quadrantal angles, but we're also going to need to know our double angle formulas, the sine of 2x and cosine of 2x. Now, I included in your Google Doc the formula sheet that you kind of print out and you kind of use as a reference. There's a few of these at the top we don't need to worry about at all, but then there's a bunch of other formulas on there that we can just kind of have access to as we're going through our reviews here, okay? But I'm gonna work out two of these together with you from scratch. There's all four of those in number 14 there. You can kind of see my work and my answers there. Let's do two of them from scratch. Let's do letters A and B, and then we'll just talk through some of the other ones, all right? So when you see the sine of 2x and cosine of 2x, right away you gotta be using your double angle formula. So the sine of 2x is easy because there's only one formula for that. So I'm gonna replace that sine of 2x with 2 sine x cosine x. And now we're going to solve this equation right here. So notice that you got a sine of x here and a sine of x right here, which means we could do a GCF. We could factor out a sine of x. And if you have the same thing right there, you're just going to carry down a 1. And then you got your 2 carries down. The sine of x is already out front. And then that cosine of x is going to carry down. And then we're going to take each one of these factors. We're going to set each one equal to 0. And when I set this one equal to 0, I'm going to minus 1 from both sides, divide both sides by 2. So be careful with the sign right there. You're going to get a negative 1/2. Really important because that's going to determine which quadrants your answers are coming from. And then here, when you see the 0, 1s, and negative 1s, you're thinking about your quadrantal angles right here. Remember, sine is the y value, cosine is the x value. So you're thinking on your unit circle, these directions say find everything in between 0 and 2 pi. So that's what we're going to do here. So when it says where is sine equal to 0, you're thinking on your unit circle, where is your y value equal to 0? So you're talking right there and right there. Okay, so if you look at my quadrantal, I got 1, 0, there's the y value 0, there's the y value 0. And what I want to know is, I want to know what are the angles. So the angle is 0 and pi radians. So I get 2 answers from this. And then right here, this is our normal stuff where I need you to think quadrant and reference angle and give me 2 answers right here. So you got to think first, where is my cosine negative? Use your all Snickers taste chocolatey. You know your cosine is positive 1 and 4, which means our cosine is negative in quadrants 2 and 3. And then if you're using your chart, the reference angle where your cosine is 1/2, so where my cosine is 1/2, the reference angle is pi over 3. So I have the quadrant and the reference angle. And then your quadrant 2, this is your 1 more, 1 less stuff. Remember, your quadrant 2 angle is going to be, quadrant 1 would be the reference angle. Quadrant 2 is 1 number smaller, which is 2 pi over 3. And then the quadrant 4 is 1 number higher, which is 4 pi over 3. And if it is in quadrant 4, then you double that, subtract 1. So if you double that, that'll be 6, subtract 1, that'll be 5. And then these are all 4 of our answers right here. So there's letter A, and then let's work on one where you got to do the cosine of 2x. Let's jump to letter D. Now here's the tip when you got the cosine of 2x. To me, you got a little bit of thought involved at the beginning, then the rest of it is pretty much the same. So when you do the cosine of 2x, what we told you before, when you make your choice here, what I want you to do is look at the other trig function that's in the problem. So when I look at that cosine to it, so I'm gonna look over here. If I only see cosines, cosine squares, doesn't matter if it's cosine to the 21st power. If you see cosines right there, choose the one that only has cosines in it. So on letter B, when I look at that cosine of 2x, and I look at the other trig function in there, I only see sines in there, which means I'm gonna choose only the trig function that has sines in it. All right, sometimes if you don't choose that, you might get lucky and it might work out. Some things might cancel out for us, but a lot of times you run something that you can't solve if you don't follow that big tip right there. So when I see this cosine of 2x right here, I check that one, and then that's gonna give us, I'm gonna use the cosine formula right there because I have cosines that are problem. So I'm gonna make that cosine of 2x right there. I'm gonna turn into that 2 cosine squared x minus 1. And then that plus 2 cosine squared that was already there, that carries down. And then we're going to solve this equation the rest of the way here. So when you have 2, this is just like a 2x squared plus another 2x squared, that'll get you 4x squared, right? So that's going to give us 4 cosine squared, and then the minus 1 carries down, equals 0. And then we're going to isolate that trig function, get that cosine by itself. So we're going to move the 1 over. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And then to get rid of the 2, you're going to square root both sides. And please remember, whenever you square root both sides, you have to remember the plus or minus. Then we can square root the top and the bottom. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. Now, when you have the plus or minus, if I say which quadrants is your cosine positive or negative, you're talking all 4 quadrants. So be really careful with that. Make sure you're giving me 4 answers and not just 2 answers like we did over here. And then the reference angle from your trig chart, the reference angle where your cosine is 1/2, it still has a pi over 3 reference angle. So notice I did my quadrants, I did my reference angle, and now we're going to list the answers here. So the quadrant 1 is your reference angle. Quadrant 2 is 1 number smaller on the top. Quadrant 3 is 1 number higher on the top. And then quadrant 4 is double that, which is 6, and subtract 1. So we'll get 5 pi over 3. And then we get 4 answers for that one. And then as we're looking at the other 2 problems, B and C, it's the same deal, all right? But we already mentioned on letter B, you got that cosine of 2x right there. So the one that I want you to choose is you look at the other trig function in there, since you have nothing but signs right there. And then that's why I'm going to choose that 1 minus 2 sine squared. Okay, so I choose that 1 minus 2 sine squared, that sine squared carry down, have the minus 1 carry down. 1 minus 1, those 1's cancel out. This is -2. That's like a -2x squared plus a 1x squared is -1x squared. So -2 plus 1 gives me -1 sine squared. And then divide both sides by the -1, square root both sides. But when you square root 0, you're going to get 0. So you don't have a plus or minus on that one. And then that's your quadrantal angle, where you're thinking, where's my y value equal to 0? And that's like what we did on letter A. You got that, look where that y is 0, that's at 0 in pi radians right there. And then the letter C, when you see the sine of 2x, that's easy. Make that 2 sine cosine right away. Carry the other one down. And then you could do a GCF. See how you got a cosine there and a cosine there, and they're both together on the same side. And so just do a GCF, factor that out, carry down the sine effect. The 2 is there, the cosine is there, carry down the sine. And then anytime it's identical out front like that, that's always going to be a 1. And then you set each one of these equal to 0. Now here, you can divide both sides by the 2. You'll get cosine is equal to 0. Now remember, your cosine is your x value. So you're thinking on your unit circle where your x value is equal to 0. So that's that right there and right there. That's pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And here when I ask you where is sine equal to 1, that's where your y value is equal to 1. And that's just right there at pi over 2. And I guess we already had that answer. So there's only 2 answers that you got right there. But it doesn't say -1, so you're not including that. But we are including the pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 from that cosine is equal to 0. So there you go. Thank you.